The American Highway Hunter, the GMC T-70's Soviet adventure. Subscribe to the channel and leave your comments. Hey folks, if you're into gripping stories about military tech, its trials, and its impact on history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Picture this. It's June of 1943, the height of World War II. The Soviet Union is locked in a brutal struggle against Nazi Germany, while the United States, as part of the Allied coalition, is churning out weapons and supplies to support its partners. A group of Soviet engineers and military experts finds themselves on American soil, specifically at the General Motors Proving Grounds in Milford, Michigan. Their mission? To check out the heavy M6 tank. But fate has a curveball in store. One of the lead engineers, Quentin Berg, gets a little too chatty and spills the beans about a brand new American tank destroyer, the GMC T-70, which hasn't even hit full production yet. This moment sparks a fascinating chapter in military history, one that bridges American ingenuity with Soviet scrutiny. In this story, I'm going to take you on a journey through the life of the GMC T-70, a machine that embodied America's bold vision for tank-killing technology. We'll explore how it was tested by Soviet engineers, what they thought of it, and how it left a surprising mark on Soviet tank design. This isn't just a technical rundown. It's a tale of cross-cultural exchange, wartime challenges, and the gritty realities of engineering under pressure. I've beefed up the narrative with my own thoughts, economic insights, and historical context to give you a full picture of why this machine matters. So, buckle up for a deep dive into a forgotten piece of World War II history. The backstory: America's quest for the ultimate tank destroyer. To understand the GMC T-70, we need to rewind to the 1930s. Back then, the United States was starting to grapple with the idea of specialized vehicles designed to take out enemy tanks. Tanks were becoming the kings of the battlefield, and the U.S. Army knew it needed something fast, lethal, and purpose-built to counter them. But early efforts were, frankly, a bit of a mess. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, American engineers were still scrambling to find the right formula. The problem? To build a fast tank destroyer with a rotating turret, you needed a solid chassis, ideally a tank chassis. Early experiments with the light tank M3 were a bust. It just wasn't up to the task. Things started looking up when engineers turned to the medium tank M4, better known as the Sherman. This led to the GMC T-35, an early tank destroyer that was decent, but not ideal. The U.S. Tank Destroyer Command, led by General Andrew Bruce, wasn't thrilled. Why? Because the M4 was a medium tank, big, heavy, and not exactly nimble. Bruce had a vision. A tank destroyer should be lightning fast with a low profile to dodge enemy fire. This dream gave birth to the GMC T-70, a machine that would become a milestone in American tank building. The T-70, later standardized as the M18 Hellcat, rolled off the Buick assembly line in July of 1943. It was a game changer, the first American tracked vehicle with a torsion bar suspension, making it smoother and more agile than its predecessors. Armed with a 76mm M1 gun, it was designed to hit hard and move fast. But like any new tech, it had its quirks. Let's dive into what made this machine special and why it caught the Soviets' attention. The GMC T-70 was America's attempt to build the ultimate tank destroyer. Weighing in at about 17 tons, it was light for its time, with a sleek, low silhouette that made it a tough target. On paper, it could hit speeds of up to 80 kilometers per hour, blazing fast for a tracked vehicle in the 1940s. Its 76mm M1 gun was a close cousin to the M7 gun used on the earlier GMC M10, packing enough punch to take on most tanks of the era. The torsion bar suspension was a big deal, giving it a smooth ride and better handling over rough terrain. But there was a catch. The T-70's armor was paper thin, with most plates just 12.7 millimeters thick. That was enough to stop heavy machine gun fire, But against tank shells, or even anti-tank rifles, it was practically useless. To make matters worse, the engineers ditched the powered turret rotation during development, meaning the crew had to crank the turret by hand, a real pain in the heat of battle. General Bruce's vision of a super-fast, low-profile tank killer was bold, but the T-70 wasn't perfect. Still, it was a leap forward, and the U.S. had big plans. They aimed to build nearly 9,000 of these machines by 1945, with 1,600 earmarked for Lend-Lease to allies like the Soviet Union and Britain. As it turned out, those plans didn't quite pan out. The British took just 2 T-70s for testing, and the Soviets got only 5. Why so few? And what did the Soviets think when they got their hands on this American hot rod? Let's find out. The story of how the GMC T-70 ended up in Soviet hands is straight out of a Hollywood script. In June of 1943, a team of Soviet engineers, led by a guy named Sorvin, arrived at the General Motors Proving Grounds in Milford, Michigan. Their official mission was to check out the heavy M6 tank, but the Americans were tight-lipped about their latest projects. Enter Quentin Berg, a key engineer on the GMC M10 and T-70 programs. For reasons we can only guess at, Berg got chatty, really chatty. Maybe he was frustrated with the T-70's teething problems, especially its new torsion bar suspension, and hoped the Soviets might have some insights. After all, the T-70 suspension was partly inspired by the Soviet KV-1 tank, which the U.S. had received for study in the fall of 1942. Berg spilled details about the T-70 that the Soviets hadn't even asked for. They got a quick peek at a prototype, though Sorvin's sketch of it was way off the mark. Still, the Soviets walked away with a rough idea of what this new machine was all about. Fast forward to early 1944, and 5 T-70s were shipped to the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease program. 3 arrived in Murmansk on February 1st aboard the SS Thorstein Veblen, part of convoy GW-56A. 2 more landed in Sievirodvinsk on February 3rd aboard the SS Albert C. Ritchie in convoy GW-56B. These machines, built in November of 1943, were from an early batch, still plagued by issues that Buick would later fix in December. Why did the Soviets get so few? And what did they make of this American speedster? Let's head to the testing grounds to find out. Soviet testing. High hopes, harsh realities. The 5 GMC T-70s were sent to various Soviet testing facilities for a thorough evaluation. One machine, serial number 446, arrived at the NIBT Proving Ground in Kubinka on March 20th, 1944, along with a stack of technical manuals that made the testers' lives easier. The Soviets dubbed it the T-70 self-propelled gun and dove in. This was no ordinary machine. It was unlike anything the Americans had sent before. Its low-profile, torsion bar suspension, quick-release engine and transmission, and dual controls, borrowed from the light tank M501, were all cutting-edge. But would it hold up under Soviet scrutiny? Road tests, built for highways, not mud. The T-70 was put through its paces from March to May of 1944, covering 1,048 kilometers. That included 172 kilometers on cobblestone roads, 214 on asphalt, 530 on dirt tracks, and 132 on snowy terrain. The results? A mixed bag, to put it mildly. On asphalt, the T-70 was decent but didn't live up to its hype. It maxed out at 75.6 kilometers per hour, falling short of the promised 80. Average speeds were 47.6 kilometers per hour on asphalt and 38.4 on cobblestone. Not bad, but not stellar. At speeds above 60 kilometers per hour, the vehicle started to skid, and the differential didn't provide enough stability. The turning radius was a whopping 12.3 meters, which was disappointing for a light vehicle. The transmission's gear ratios were clearly tuned for smooth roads, not the rugged Soviet countryside. Things got worse on dirt tracks. The average speed dropped to 23.8 kilometers per hour, slower than any other American light tracked vehicle tested. Fuel consumption was astronomical, 357 liters of gasoline, and 11.3 liters of oil per 100 kilometers. For comparison, the Soviet Su-76M, while no fuel sipper, was far more efficient. The T-70 struggled on uneven dirt roads, and deep ruts or loose soil stopped it dead. The testers blamed the hydromatic transmission, but the real culprit was deeper, as we'll see. The snow tests were the final nail in the coffin. The T-70 guzzled 708 liters of gasoline and 20.2 liters of oil per 100 kilometers. The engine ran at max RPMs, and the hydromatic transmission kept shifting gears automatically, burning fuel like there was no tomorrow. The steepest slope it could climb was just 18 degrees, limited by engine torque and poor track grip. The only bright spot? It could ford water up to 1.55 meters deep, a solid result for a vehicle this light. The fighting compartment, cramped and compromised. The T-70's fighting compartment was another sore point. Back in the early 1940s, the Soviets had toyed with the idea of tank destroyers with open-top rotating turrets, like the Su-51, based on the T-50 tank with a 57mm ZS-4 gun. Those plans never got off the ground, but the Americans made it happen with the T-70. The catch? It came at a cost. The T-70 carried just 45 rounds of ammunition, fewer than the Su-76MS 60 rounds, and even less than the German Marder's paltry load. Visibility was poor, with only the gunner getting decent sighting devices. The loader had a tough time in the cramped turret, and the commander's position was downright dangerous. He was more exposed than anyone, acting more like a machine gunner than a leader. Soviet testers had previously praised the GMC M10's fighting compartment for its ergonomics, but the T-70? Not so much. Firing tests, a silver lining. Despite its woes, the T-70 shone in one area: shooting. Testing was delayed due to ammo shortages, but when it finally happened, the results were impressive. Firing from a standstill or short stops, the T-70 outperformed the Su-76M, scoring 10 out of 10 hits in shortstop tests. The 76mm M101 gun was accurate and easy to aim in control conditions. But firing on the move was a disaster. At ranges of 700 to 1,000 meters, none of the 8 shots hit the target twice. Sustained fire rate was 7.7 to 9.7 rounds per minute, with a maximum of 11.4. Decent, but not exceptional compared to Soviet designs. The verdict: a highway hotshot, not a war winner. The Soviet testers weren't kind. They branded the T-70 an auto-highway machine, great for cruising paved roads, useless for the muddy, snowy battlefields of the Eastern Front. Its thin armor, transmission troubles, and insane fuel consumption made it a non-starter. Large-scale Lend-Lease deliveries? Out of the question. The Soviets opted instead for proven machines like the M42-76 W. Sherman, which arrived in droves by the fall of 1944. Still, it wasn't all bad. The torsion bar suspension earned praise for its smooth ride and reliability. No tracks came off during testing, a rarity for the time. The quick-release engine and transmission were also a hit, making field repairs a breeze. The Soviet legacy, an unexpected influence. Here's where the story gets juicy. Despite flunking its tests, the GMC T-70 left a mark on Soviet tank design. In 1945, the Soviets got their hands on a captured German Kruppalder Waffenträger, a light tank destroyer with a big gun. They liked the concept, but hated the chassis. Enter the T-70 as an inspiration. One of the 5 machines was sent to Sverdlovsk, where it influenced the design of the Su-100P, a Soviet self-propelled gun with a 100mm cannon. While not a direct copy, the T-70's light, mobile design shaped the Su-100PS philosophy. Though it never entered mass production, this Soviet machine carried echoes of its American ancestor. The T-70 also played a role in testing captured German armor. Its 76mm gun punched through the side armor of a PZ, KPFW, Tiger Osta beat up to 1,500 meters, proving it could hold its own in a flank attack. Today, the only surviving Soviet T-70 sits in the technical center of Patriot Park in Kubinka, alongside the Waffenträger. It's a living testament to the wartime exchange of ideas between allies. To understand why the T-70 didn't flood Soviet ports, let's talk economics. The Lend-Lease program, launched in 1941, was a lifeline for the Allies. The U.S. supplied about 400,000 trucks, over 14,000 planes, and around 12,000 tanks and self-propelled guns to the Soviet Union, worth roughly $11 billion, about $150 billion in 2025 dollars. But tanks made up just 4% of the total. The Soviets were cranking out their own tanks, like the T-34, by the tens of thousands. In 1944 alone, the Ural Tank Factory No. 183 in Nizhny Tagil churned out over 15,000 T-34-85s, dwarfing Lend-Lease tank deliveries. The T-70 didn't fit the bill. Its production was limited, about 2,500 units total, and even the U.S. Army had doubts, converting many into M39 armored utility vehicles. Lend-Lease convoys faced U-boat attacks, with about 10% lost at sea, so the Allies prioritized proven gear over experimental machines like the T-70. My take: why the T-70 fell short. Here's my 2 cents. The GMC T-70 was a bold idea that didn't quite hit the mark. The U.S. bet big on speed and firepower, but on the Eastern Front, where mud, snow, and heavy tanks ruled, survivability and reliability were king. The T-70's thin armor and finicky transmission made it a fish out of water in Soviet conditions. It was like bringing a sports car to a monster truck rally. The cultural gap between American and Soviet engineering is fascinating. The U.S. focused on tech and crew comfort, while the Soviets prioritized simplicity and mass production. The T-70 was a product of American optimism. Build it fast, make it fancy, but it didn't mesh with the gritty reality of the Eastern Front. The GMC T-70 may not have been a battlefield star, but it wasn't a total loss. Its influence on the Su-100P shows how even a flawed machine can spark ideas. It's a reminder that innovation often comes from failure, and the exchange of tech between allies shaped the war's outcome. The T-70's story is a snapshot of a time when nations pooled their brains and brawn to defeat a common enemy. The GMC T-70 Soviet adventure is more than a tale of a tank. It's a story of human ingenuity, wartime collaboration, and the messy reality of building weapons under pressure. It didn't win the war, but it taught valuable lessons and inspired new designs. Today, as we face new technological challenges, the T-70 reminds us that even setbacks can pave the way for progress. Subscribe and comment. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the GMC T-70, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of this American tank destroyer? Want more stories about World War II tech? Let us know and stay tuned for more.